Jason Caterina on AM 560, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. And yesterday, Kash Patel, before the Senate Judiciary Committee, had this entertaining exchange with one Adam Schiff. The topic is almost irrelevant, but it was related to the Epstein files. There was an effort by some of the neo-Marxist senators to make an issue of the Epstein files, that there's some sort of cover-up going on, and so on and so forth. And Adam Schiff, in his inimitable fashion, tried to insinuate some sort of additional conspiracy afoot that where the administration was providing preferential treatment to Ghislaine Maxwell, inappropriately moving her to a minimum security prison. And this is how that went.
Do you think they're stupid?
No. I think the American people believe the truth, that I'm not in the weeds on the everyday movements of
you're
inmates.
Not in the weeds?
What I am doing is protecting this country, providing historic reform, and combating the weaponization of intelligence by the likes of you. And we have countlessly proven you to be a liar in Russiagate, in January 6th. You are the biggest fraud to ever sit in the United States Senate. You are a disgrace to this institution and an utter coward.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised that you continue to lie from your perch and put on a show so you can go raise money for your charade. You are a political buffoon at best.
Well, you can take an internet troll.
Take it to the bank that the FBI is protecting this country and the state and citizens of the California. We are bringing historic reform. Point of order. But all you care about is a child sex predator that was prosecuted by a prior administration, and the Obama Justice Department and the Biden Justice Department did squat. And what did President Trump do? Bring new charges courageously. And what have we done?
Chairman,
you said I'm the most transparent FBI director in history. 33,000 pages of information to you.
Walter.
I challenge you to say anything credibly to the truth. Go ahead and run to the cameras where you want to go now.
Well, that was fun. Matthew Schmitz is the founder and editor of Compact Magazine. He has written recently on the topic. The Epstein Myth is the title of his piece over at firstthings.com. Matthew Schmitz, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, thanks for having me. What an exchange.
Yes, it was testy to say the least, but, there's a lot of scar tissue that has built up between those two individuals. And frankly, even though I wasn't necessarily complimentary of the way that Bondi and Kash and Bongino and the administration handled the Epstein matter initially, he's certainly not wrong about Adam Schiff. I'll give him that. The Epstein myth is what, according to you?
So the Epstein myth is a story that has been told about him that goes beyond the well-established facts of the case. And the well-established facts are that Epstein abused underage girls. What we don't know, and I think this actually surprises a lot of people because we've heard it repeated over and over again, what we don't know is that Epstein ever actually ran a kind of child sex ring, that he blackmailed people, that he worked on behalf of foreign intelligence. There are accusations to that effect, but when you look into them, they're often coming from accusers who aren't credible. And despite all the disclosures we've had, all the investigations into this we've had, nothing has really turned up to support those claims.
Well, I guess there's two things. One is you have Ghislaine Maxwell serving a 20-year sentence for human sex trafficking. So that speaks to an operation, and it sort of logically speaks to an operation that it was bigger than Maxwell and Epstein. just by the
well,
that's
that's the funny thing.
Well, let me finish though. But by this additional
Sure.
this additional fact, which is you have $170 million in civil settlements that have been paid out to alleged victims.
Yeah. So I'll just address those in turn. First, with Maxwell, what I think isn't well understood is that Maxwell was charged with and convicted of trafficking people to exactly one client, Jeffrey Epstein. Mm-hmm. So that is the extent of the trafficking operation as it's been legally kind of established through her trial. Then in terms of the payouts, there's not an adversarial process there. It's it's very much like other kind of systems of payouts you've seen in sex abuse cases, where if you make an accusation that is not kind of patently absurd on its face, you're going to receive a payout. So neither of those really kind of gets us to where we need to go to establish that Epstein was running this sex trafficking ring. And it's kind of funny because I think both the people on the right and the left have kind of assumed that this is the case.
Well, it is. I mean, you're right about the conviction, but I mean, just because they didn't include additional charges, they didn't feel maybe they could make out a case, or they weren't getting cooperation from targets, and they didn't feel they could make out a case. I mean, so I understand your point, but it is to make a great understatement, it is highly unusual to pay out hundreds of settlements totaling $170 million, and if there was no criminal wrongdoing, or that it was that it was all centered around a single individual and there were no other participants. I mean, that's just it's sort of, you can understand where people would logically conclude, with all the victims that have come forward and some who've made specific accusations about other people not named Jeffrey Epstein, and we're supposed to believe it was just Jeffrey and Ghislaine.
Yeah, I'm certainly cutting against I think what a lot of people are inclined to believe on this. But one thing I go back to, the original charges brought against Jeffrey Epstein in Florida in the 2000s, they were based on accusations from about 13 different accusers, many of them underage, and they had remarkably similar stories about the way that he abused them. But there was also another remarkable similarity between their stories. Not a single one of those initial accusers ever mentioned the involvement of another person. And that came in later through accusations from people like Virginia Giuffre, very prominent accuser, another one, Sarah Ransom. And both these people have, major credibility problems, history of making false accusations. And, Giuffre, one person she brought accusations against was Alan Dershowitz, and she later said that she may have made a mistake there. So it's one thing that I kind of, when I talk about the difference between, an Epstein myth and Epstein facts, one thing that I like to look at is sort of, what were people saying at the beginning, kind of before the media perceptions of the case took off and stories started getting told to everyone? Kind of said, well, I assume this is true, so I'm going to, or everyone else is saying this, so I'm going to get in on it too. If you're an accuser. So that's one thing that I mentioned in that article for First Things.
So is that what I mean? So then is your view that the reason that Pam Bondi and the law enforcement hierarchy and the federal government doesn't come forward and say, look, this was Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and that's it. That's all we can, at least that's all we can prove in a court of law. And this is the reason why why so many people are unsatisfied about this, why we're unsatisfied about this. But in terms of what we actually have, and the standard of evidence for a criminal proceeding, we just can't meet it, and that's where it's at. And here are all the documents with the appropriate redactions. this is what we got. Why don't they come forward and just say that?
One reason is that I think that various figures who are now in the administration previously believed that there was more to the case, as a lot of Americans do.
Yeah.
They kind of said that. They said, look, there's something dark, there's something bad going on here, and it's pretty wide ranging. And we're going to tell you the whole story. But now that I think that they have kind of the whole story, they have the documents, they're seeing that there's not as much there as a lot of people believed in it, and not as much as they believed and said. So I think when you kind of overpromise, maybe not with any bad intentions, but because you believe there's more there, it causes a lot of agita when you underdeliver. Yeah,
perhaps. Although, I mean, there's this other consequence, which is what we're dealing with now, and perhaps it would, if what you're supposing is actually the case. I mean, it seems to me that the sensible thing would be to say, look, this is what we thought. We got in here, we got our hands on everything, and this is what we understand to be true. And we were wrong. I didn't have everything, and I overstated what I thought was there. And now that I see what's there, I have informed, my opinion has changed based on the information available. I think people could understand that.
You have maybe more faith in the American people than or kind of faith in a way that I don't know if it's
politicians
totally
well
placed, because
people. Yeah.
And also the truth is, I mean, as you know, Dan, and as your listeners know, so many things are said by government officials that don't really hold water, right? That it's, if someone comes and says, okay, there's nothing to see here, everybody move along, you don't necessarily trust that, right? So I think it is a bit of a catch-22. My own view is that this has turned out to be kind of a nothing burger. I hate to use that term. It's not really appropriate, because there were real crimes here for which Epstein rightly served time, though I think he got a much lighter sentence than he should have received. Right. But in terms of the kind of broader idea of a far-reaching conspiracy, kind of like who are all the other people involved? Who are the names on the list? I think the real problem here is that there's no one really to kind of come out with and reveal on that.
Well, yeah.
And so the administration just can't do much.
Yeah, although, I mean, I got to say, again, this is just sort of advice and counsel being offered into the abyss, but I mean, like, the way to improve the belief in the federal government, to enhance your credibility, is not to continue persisting with a false story. It's to say, look, I'm the guy who's going to come forward and say what I thought wasn't the case, and I was wrong, and here's what it is. And I mean, that's something you never hear, because there's no politician who's ever wrong. And if you had somebody actually be able to substantiate, here's what I said. I know everybody remembers I said this, and now we got our hands on everything, and this is what it is, and you can see it yourself and probably come to the same conclusion I will, but come to whatever conclusion you want. I think that would enhance that person or that administration's credibility, but maybe, as you said, I'm, just a silly heart.
You're absolutely right. It would enhance the administration's credibility, and that it would be welcome. It would be welcome. Certainly from me.
One other thing that I wanted to get to as part of this myth, though, that you covered in some detail in your piece at First Things, is the idea that Epstein was a Mossad agent, that the specter of Israel looms over this whole Epstein-Maxwell operation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a suspicion a lot of people have about Epstein, and again, it's one that really lacks support. I'll just kind of mention one issue here that I think helps illustrate that. I mean, part of the idea is that Epstein, he was blackmailing people on behalf of Israel, on behalf of Mossad, and not just Virginia Giuffre, but others have said that one of the people that was involved in the sex ring was blackmailed by Epstein was Alan Dershowitz, Dershowitz, kind of a well-known figure, but among other things, a very strong advocate for Israel his whole life. So, just one question: why would Israel need to blackmail a guy who's spent his whole life defending them? It's not really clear why that would make any sense. But I do think there's something kind of going on with our politics here that's worth thinking about. People are very unhappy with American foreign policy in certain ways, with the broader way the country is being run, and they maybe feel frustration. They say, we keep voting for politicians, but it doesn't feel like anything changes. So what's going on here? And maybe they think, well, if we aren't running the country, someone else is. Maybe it's the Jews. Maybe it's Israel. It's kind of it's an explanation that people reach for. But I don't think it's one that's borne out by the facts, and I think it's one that risks diminishing our belief in our political system and therefore our capacity to affect positive change.
Matthew Schmitz is the founder and editor of Compact Magazine. The piece, The Epstein Myth, you can get at firstthings.com as well. Matthew Schmitz, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Dan, thanks for having me.
And Matthew, join us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
If you're purchasing a new home or refinancing your existing home, you need to call Team